Today's panel is going to be about a return on investment tool that the technology working group has put together as part of the RPA. The RPA, as you all know, is about how to advocating for reusable transport items, reusable packaging within the supply chain ecosystem. And all the members here on the panel today are either providers or users of the technology that is embedded within these reusable items to help give visibility and data insights through the life cycle and in the circular loop through the multiple cycles. So I'm Rob Franzo. I'm with Qualcomm Technologies. I happen to lead the technology working group as part of the RPA, and I'd like to just have each of the members introduce themselves. Dave, why don't you go first?
Okay. I'm Dave Kalan with Paxxal. I head up the marketing and sales function, and I'm primarily here because it's impossible to say no to Tim. But other than that, I'll provide hopefully the perspective from a user of the technology versus the provider of the technology.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Zeitler, business development here at Wiliot for the digital supply chain group. And I'm here to talk a little bit more about the technology and really understand what the value is for retailers, manufacturers, various points of the supply chain.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Scott Hurley. I work for Roambee. I run product marketing and strategy, and we do actual technology providing for the tracking and monitoring of assets. So like Jeremy, we can talk about the technology piece.
Now, how many of you were here for either Scott's or actually Ohad gave the presentation previously, right? Mm-hmm. So some of you may have context on what Scott's company does at Roambee and what Wiliot, Jeremy's company does at Wiliot. And Paxxal, right, by the way, is right over there. You can see it from here if you're interested in learning more about what Dave and the company does. So, by the way, the ROI calculator is available on the website, the RPA's website. I don't know if it's featured, but you get in terms of where it is on. I had a test version, so I don't know where it is actually on the production side. But when you go there, it's very easy to get put your information in as it relates to how many assets you have, the type of assets, a little bit about the use case. We did two use cases right now, and then other information about your operations. And you can go through there and do multiple runs. You can have the results sent to you, and it's a way for you to get just give first pass assessment. And then obviously you can go and talk with any of the providers with that information in hand and ask them informed questions based upon what you were able to explore with that tool. So it should make you a more informed, if you will, more informed about what your problem is, how technology can affect you positively, and then just look at that. So that's just a little context about what the intent of the ROI tool is. So with that said, Scott, why don't you first, talk a little bit about, I know you just gave the presentation, but just give us the highlight about Roambee and where you position yourself and within the ecosystem.
Sure. So at Roambee, we provide sensor-driven supply chain visibility. So we use IoT devices, cellular, 4G, 5G, that monitor for location with GPS, as well as condition, temperature, humidity, shock and tilt for damage monitoring, and security monitoring for the end-to-end validation of product quality and security, or whether it's pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, electronics, even some chemicals in automotive. But we also monitor on the asset side. So the shipment is the actual physical goods you care about. The assets are what's holding or carrying them. And sometimes they're empty and you need them to be back to the origin to use again. So shipment and asset visibility for supply chain using IoT and Bluetooth technology for some of the internal monitoring as well as package level monitoring for more granular in transit.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Jeremy, why don't you do the same for yourself?
Yeah, so Wiliot connects the internet to everyday things to devices or to products. And for packaging, in this case, it's connecting cases, connecting pallets, connecting crates, and it provides data insights from end to end through battery-free Bluetooth stickers, which is just this. And we'll talk a little bit more about the technology and how it's powered and how it provides the data insights to supply chain leaders to make decisions on how to improve and how to fix things in their supply chain.
Thanks. And Dave, how do you make use of this technologies or these
Well,
technologies?
again, coming from a different perspective, we're a user of the technology. We manufacture plastic pallets, and one of the features we offer is a smart pallet where we embed one of these type devices to capture data of everything going on in the supply chain. So think of it as the smart pallet. I don't know who actually gets credit for the quote Donald Rumsfeld or Socrates, but you don't know what you don't know. We like to think with our system and with this capturing this data, we will know. If you think what's happened to our supply chain over the last couple of years, there is a lot of we didn't know what we don't know. But those days should start to disappear if you start to adopt the technologies that's available and very affordable, I might add. So from our perspective, we're device agnostic. It depends on what the customer wants to capture and how they want to use the data. But we will also lead them how to use the data and why it's so important to capture things. Everything from the performance of the asset. Actually, in 2016, I was on a panel with AT&T here, and they at the time they said there would be 50 million or then billion connected devices and everything kind of yawned and everything. I think we've already surpassed that number. But the idea was there's data available and systems available right now that we all need to get better at understanding and how to use that. Because at the end of the day, it makes reusable packaging more affordable and more efficient. And it doesn't work in one-way packaging. It only works in reusables.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Scott, real quick, and for you and Jeremy, I'll put this to both of you without you getting up and fighting. Tell us a little bit about what the differences are between your technologies as it relates to, let's say, the problem that Dave is working to solve with his pallets.
So we're not competitive at all. We're actually work well together. And as Dave said, it's the data that lights up your supply chain and what you can do with it. So while we do design and build our own IoT devices, we also integrate with a variety of other sensors and other integrations, including with Wiliot, to provide that information that can construct and capture signals that you can actually operate on, whether it's something immediate, there's a temperature threshold that's been exceeded, or a better lane that you should take, a better performing carrier,
Right.
for example. So one of the big differences, I would say, where we play in the space is that we operate both on the asset side, but when the assets are carrying goods, whether it's food and beverage, but also pharmaceutical and all the other industries we talked about, we also do the shipment monitoring.
And thank you for that. So, Jeremy, I think you would agree that you're complementary technologies in terms of what you do, right? And just for everybody's benefit, what Scott has and Roambee, he mentioned that he has narrowband IoT or low power wide area networking technologies as what communicates through the cell towers to the infrastructure. And that what it can actually do is they have gateways effectively that can receive the information coming from either Bluetooth beacons that are battery or the passive energy harvesting that Wiliot provides. And so that provides those insights. Now, what's really key about both of those is those are standards-based technologies. And by being standards-based technologies, how many of you have Bluetooth on your phones? Okay. Well, guess what? Well, that's what in principle they're using. How many of you have a cellular modem in your phone? Well, and that probably came from Qualcomm, by the way. But the bottom line is that's the technology that we're leveraging here. And just to give you a sense, the return on investment, what's the investment? We've been making Wiliot's got hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, right? Roambee has been, what, 8 years now, 9 years you've been
8 years.
operational, right? And so you look at, and as well as Paxxal, you're relatively new as a startup, but you look at your team, they have lots of years of history, right?
Mhm.
And Ben was just talking earlier about the investment in sustainable. So that investment's going in and that return on the utilization of those assets, the insights, those are the operational things that you can have. Now let's talk a little bit about the data. Dave, we talked a little bit about data earlier, and it's what's really important is the right data, right?
Right. We're capturing incredible amounts of information. With the track and trace, you know how long a product, for example, taken to go from point A to point B. You know the temperature from point A to point B. You know the vibration or shock from point A to point B. You know the chain of custody from point A to point B. All this data is being dumped, but at the end of the day, what data matters to you? You know, what do you need to really manage your business most efficiently? And that's, again, why we need to work with actually all the providers to understand everything available. And so we could explain to our customers, here's how you do it using basically a smart pallet. And it doesn't have to be a smart pallet. It's a smart bin or a smart tote. Anything you want to keep track of, that the technology is here right now to do.
Thank you. And Jeremy, while foiling off of that, what are some of the insights? What are some of the things that Wiliot's been able to do with your customers that gave them that unique data insights, and what were they able to do with that?
Yeah, well, more recently with Wiliot, we've been doing more pilots and POCs, just being new. Our commercialized tag has been available since probably January of this year. Prior to that, we really were still new and still discovering where we fit, and then we started to now focus on supply chains, and now more recently reusable packaging. So with that, a lot of the data that we're providing is item level. So we're able to show on a truck, on a reefer truck, for example, if bananas are being frozen in transit and where on that pallet position is that being frozen. So we're able to provide that data. We did one also with a case study with strawberries, a pallet of strawberries. Why did it, see freezing temperatures 7 times in a 4-hour delivery cycle? Oh, by the way, it also was 19 miles from the DC. Why did it take 4 hours? And then when it was delivered, it passed QC and then saw 75-degree temperatures for 3 hours after it was delivered, after it was put into the cooler and then brought back out. So we didn't know why these things were happening, and we presented it to our customer because they're the experts on their supply chain. So we were able to provide these data insights that weren't really able to be seen at the item level prior. So this is all new. This is happening now.
And really key there. So, right, the maturing of the technology, we're moving from proof of concepts to now pilots and then to production. But what'll be really key is when those frozen strawberries get real-time dispatched to the ice cream factory, and then those cooked strawberries move over to the pie as opposed to fresh, right? So we remember that food shrinkage that we talked, or if you were here earlier, we heard about the large amount of food shrinkage, and really it is about the agility within the supply chain to repurpose that those foods to different, if they're still fit for use, obviously.
Exactly.
Right?
It allows leaders to make those decisions, in real
Get those
time.
insights,
Yeah,
right?
they get the alert, and they could just go, all right, somebody at the store needs to do something within minutes, not 3 hours later.
And Scott, can you share some insights with your deployments, because you're at the deployment stage right now as well, right?
Yeah. So there has been some scars, I think, in the industry where companies have used IoT, cellular-based 4G, or even predecessor 2G and 3G 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it didn't work as expected. And so now we have to work past that scar tissue. And we are at the point now where we don't do proof of concept anymore. We do proof of value. We know that it works, but it's about understanding what the customer's expectations are, what is it they're trying to solve for, what benefit, meeting that, as opposed to working on can you pick up the device from Greenland? Well, yeah, we probably could. Or can you get get connectivity in Tierra del Fuego, maybe, but unless you're shipping there, it doesn't really matter. So from a deployment stage is doing the PUV, making sure that we are solving for what matters to them from a business perspective, and then sharing them with our other customers that it does work in Asia, in India, in the Middle East, in Europe, wherever they need connectivity. The technology works well today versus 10 years ago. There were still some pretty big gaps there that were affecting their performance.
Thank you for that. Now, we started off talking about our return on investment tools. Do each of you have return on investment tools, and is that something that you use with your customers to show them the advantages?
Yeah.
Now, as you think about what we did in the technology working group as a seed, right, which it is, how have you applied those tools? Can each one of you just kind of share, as you've engaged with customers, how you apply your analysis and help them?
Sure. So we have a couple of them, but you have to be really careful with the ROI because people need to be able to identify with. If I talk about how Google is using our solution, well, nobody else here is Google, so it's not going to be applicable and may not be relatable. And so on our website, we have one that's high level, like we're doing with the RPA, that's more about educational, enough to get people to want to learn more. But if you're going to do a real ROI analysis, then you need to be willing to share with your solution provider real information about the volume and the number of journeys you have, the cycle time, all the real important things that actually takes probably an hour of working with you and getting that information. And this is longer in the sales cycle, so you can come up with an actual meaningful ROI that you can take to your boss and say, this is what we can expect, versus a high level one is more educational, just to get people excited about what can happen.
Okay. Jeremy, do you also have an ROI tool on your website?
Yeah, so right now we're very new, right? So we're building these models today.
Yeah.
We're going through each business case and we're understanding where the value is in it. We're building that, and we're in the process now. It's very exciting because it is so new that we're building models on asset tracking. We're building models for freshness. We're building models that expand, that where you could see where items need to be if it's a shelf business case, so on the shelf availability for BOPUS and things like that. So right now, as we continue to build and refine these models, that's where we're going to start to kind of release the turnkey solutions. So it's exciting because it's all happening now. So this is very early for us, and it's a good time to be part of the conversation, part of the discussion, or even part of the pilots or POCs today. And then I think by next year we'll have some good stories to tell.
Very good. And Dave?
Actually, we deal with this issue every conversation, because our challenge is, okay, how do I convince somebody that even you've been using a $25 wood pallet, probably you got for free, and you need to spend, let's say, $100 on our pallet, and this is a good deal for you. And they look at you like, well, what happens if I lose the pallet? What happens if I do this? So the very first discussion we typically have is track and trace.
Right.
That you could track this asset, you know where it is, you know your inventories immediately. And if you're used to having a loss rate of 10 or 15% of your fleet, well, you could probably get it down to under 1%. And actually, it probably could go below 1%. Then it's a question that, do you have the ability to recover your asset? You know, that's a whole different conversation. But usually it's a stepping process. Like, okay, so that you do that with the technology, that makes total common sense. And then, by the way, do you have a cold chain? Oh yeah, I do. Well, there's the same devices will give you a temperature. So it's another check on whatever else you might be using in your system. Yeah, I've always said that from our perspective, pallets are a mainstay of the industry. You're most likely using a pallet. So why not convert to a pallet that then gives you all these other benefits? Because I'm not asking you to add another step. I'm not asking you to add another product. I'm asking you to enhance your product and use what's available. And then here's some of the benefits you're going to get along the way. But at the end of the day, it's all about ROI.
It is.
You know, I mean, if you can't explain that there's a reasonable return on your investment, or completely handles an issue that has just been a thorn in a side. Let's say simple as product recall. My product recall system stinks. It takes me forever to find things. Well, here's one way with this track and trace. You know every reusable asset, where's it been? A lot of times you know if it's been cleaned. You know who used it before. Yeah, so there's a lot of things you could quickly do to use this technology.
Good, thank you. And you know the key here is that it's about engaging, solving a specific problem, and then there's so many adjacent opportunities based upon building that relationship and scaling. And that's really very, very useful because you can exceed the ROI. Scott, does any example come to mind where
Absolutely.
You have one of those in your back pocket?
Absolutely. So you can tell the story of how other people have leveraged technology until you're blue in the face, and you can only get so far. What you really need is to show people their own data. And so the entry, as David talked about, often is around track and trace, usually around prevention of loss of these assets. But once you have all this information, then you can start to show you, customer, with your data, here's how we can do B, C, and D in terms of increased utilization, increased velocity, lower inventory count cost, things like that. So, for example, we have a customer called AP Plasman in the automotive space in and around Detroit in Canada. And they have been working with us. And again, they're misplacing assets. But over time, and again, it takes a while sometimes to tag these, whether you're doing it or they're doing it for themselves, to build up enough data where you can start to see the actual benefits. But after a year, it was clear that they were able to much better meet demand for the assets where they were needed to increase velocity. They didn't have to do manual counts anymore, and they weren't misplacing anymore. So the value was very strong based on their own data they could calculate. But it takes time.
It takes time, but then those mosaics become very clear pictures, and then you can now start applying those learnings elsewhere within the organization. Now, just real quick, first off, are there any questions from the audience? I don't want to ignore you if there's anyone out there with anything. Okay, so we're gonna start wrapping up, but in doing that, just from a perspective of the technology working group within the RPA, what are some of the benefits that your organization is getting from participating in the TWG?
So from my perspective, having been a member for a year or so now, it's really the perspective of multiple parties, including not just additional technology providers that we can partner and learn from, but also the users of them. Because ultimately, the technology is just a means to an end. If you aren't solving real problems for customers, then there's no value in it. And so just being able to find that perspective and be able to make sure that whatever we're building is real value to the customer.
Yeah. And by the way, Scott and I, obviously you saw Qualcomm kind of sprinkled throughout all the presentations, because this really is an area of investment. You may have, if you knew about Qualcomm, you may have thought about us as just having been inside of handsets. Yeah, I'm holding up an industrial handheld, and we're in there too. But the point is, the investment that's going in, we're just starting. And the next work item that we're actually doing is an update on our technology white paper. It's presently available on the site, but as we know, technology advances. There's, every 18 months, there's significant shifts. We've got right here in the panel, and in fact, what Dave's doing with his palette is technology, new technology as well, in terms of how you are improving the quality, the fitness for use. And so, the work that we're doing within the technology working group is to really pull together, to use that term, pull all of the insights and the understandings, and then to make that available through our website for the community to leverage, make use of, and then engage with suppliers so that you can have that dialogue around what your problem is, where your friction is, and how the things that we do can solve those things for you. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and the insights. It's always a pleasure.